is an international couples and sex therapist and widely sought after expert in the field of sexuality and intimate relationships. I had to just read some of his credentials. This is not all of them. He is a licensed marriage and families therapist, a certified sex therapist, a sex offender treatment provider, a certified forensic mental health evaluator, certified child custody evaluator, and a Gottman educator in a number of roles. For 20 years, he's worked with everyday folks to shed labels and shame, lean into anxiety, and build better and stronger relationships. He's the author of this new book, Making Nights with Naughty, an intimacy guide for the rule-following, organized, perfectionist, practical, and color within the lines types. That's not us. It actually is a lot of us in many ways. Many of us, not fully. We're many different things, people. He has been featured in the Huffington Post, Women's Health, Men's Health Insider, DailyMail.com, Fatherly, and many more. I have loved his book, and I wanted to read a couple of excerpts. I asked if I could do that. It's kind of weird to read the author's end words to the author, but I'm doing it anyway. Okay, first of all, I love this quote that it's by Mae West. When I'm good, I'm very good, but when I'm bad, I'm better. Okay. I love that. Thank you for that. Okay, these are just two tiny paragraphs that made me stop and think that I loved from the book. Okay. The title here, Values Are Not Conditional. I could use a lot of lead up, but I'm just going to read them. In sexual and intimate relationships, values are not conditional or dependent on a particular outcome or someone else's behavior. They are all about you and your behavior. It's about your process of getting closer to the kind of person you want to be and the unencumbered sexual being you want to be for your partner. Love that. Okay, and many things that stood out. This is under choosing naughty actions, but it's not that exciting. Sorry, so don't get your head in the gutter here. Okay, choosing naughty actions. Often, being naughty isn't a reflection of sexual behavior. Being naughty can mean rebelling against old, worn-out sexual scripts about what being a sexual person is, how a sexual person thinks, and how a sexual person behaves. Being naughty can also mean rebelling against expectations and rules thrust upon you by authority figures and society. Moreover, being naughty can mean you are acting contrary to past behaviors so you get more of what you want. Love that. So with those little excerpts, his book is going to be for sale after. I'll turn it over.
Thank you so much. I'm so delighted. You can clap. I appreciate the applause. It helps me to maintain my inflated sense of self. I'm just so really honored to be invited to speak with you today about making nice with naughty. When I reflect on growing up as a child and the fond memories of being in the kitchen, sitting around the table with the women in the family, and just listening to the stories, and often that included what was happening in the bedroom, right? And I was just sharing with my table mates earlier that from a very teenager, people would share with me things about their sex life that in retrospect was quite inappropriate. But I already had the therapist thing, any of the other healers, does that resonate? Sometimes when people say, what's helped you to become such a successful therapist, I say I've had 18 years of apprenticeship, also known as childhood. I wanted to highlight for you how I got to this place of really thinking about sexuality differently. And it started about 6 months into the pandemic. And like a lot of therapists, we went to Zoom, right? Or we went to a video conference with our clients. And I was working with a couple, and it just had this light bulb moment that I bet I could predict with great accuracy the quality of this couple's sex life by just asking one question. Are you a be careful parent, or are you a have fun parent? Are you a be careful, be careful, be careful, be careful? Or are you a have fun parent? Any careful parents? And then the have fun parents. The have fun parents. Certainly, my experience since pondering that question and asking many couples is that the ones who say that they tend to be more be careful are the ones that struggle with intimacy and intimacy and sex within their relationship. And so then I began to think about this further and learned about the over-controlled temperament, not to be confused with over-controlling. That's not good. The over-controlled temperament. So this evening, I'm going to share with you more about the over-controlled temperament. But most importantly, I don't want this to be about me talking at you. I want this to be a conversation. So at any time you have a stroke of inspiration and you want to ask a question, I encourage you to ask it at the time that you're excited about it. Deal? Yeah. Families. They've had a lot of rules, right? So there's the rule orientation that is in the title of the book. People can be made to feel like, oh, I have to do the right thing. I can't risk getting into trouble. I can't risk making mistakes. Anybody grow up in that kind of family? Does that sound familiar? The assumption, of course, being that if you do what you're told, life will work out for you. Life only works out for those who follow the rules. That can really supercharge the over-controlled temperament. So let me just kind of back up and talk about what temperament is. Temperament is the stable way of showing up in the world. That part of your personality that is pretty consistent. And two of the most famous temperaments are introversion, extroversion. Right? They're the ones that we're most familiar with. And they're the ones that get a lot of press. Of course, there are other temperaments, and one of them is the over-controlled, under-controlled temperament. And with temperaments, there's no good or bad associated with it. It's just how you show up in the world. So when we talk about these temperaments, they can fuel how we perceive our relationships, how we perceive the world, how we perceive our partner, and of course, how we perceive ourselves. So everyone has gotten a sheet, the word pair sheet. And so I'm going to invite you, if you haven't already, is to go through each word pair and choose the word that other people would most likely use to describe you. Not necessarily other people. Other people, how other people would most likely use to describe you. In general, sometimes spouses aren't good choices because they're really close to the issue at hand. And as you're reading through each of these, just pay attention to where your mind chatter is. Is it spending a lot of time on a particular word? Does this really describe me? Who else would think this? Versus just going really quickly and making a decision about it. So once you've gone through that, you're just looking at which column has the most tick marks. And the column that has the most tick marks is the column that you lean toward. The under-controlled temperament is on the left side, the over-controlled temperament is on the right side. And like a volume, some of us are going to be a little over-controlled or a little under-controlled, and some of us are going to be a lot of over-controlled. Yeah, a great question for an overcontrolled person. The question was, what would be a lot of overcontrol? I want to know exactly where I stand. Okay. So remember, there are no right or wrong. It's just how you're showing up. Now, some people can have, and I'll talk about this here in a second. Some people can have maladaptive levels of over control, just like they can have maladaptive levels of under control. Do we have any UCs in the room? Anybody who's under control? That would be expected, right? Given the audience, including myself, anybody who goes to graduate school has to be over controlled, right? It would be otherwise really hard to get through graduate school without having that superpower, right, of being over controlled. What is under control? If you have more, if the split it leans heavily on the UC side, if you're UC, excellent. See, I admire UCs because you know how to live it up. The left is UC. Yeah, the A column. So before we go any further, I want to read this quote to you by Fumi Akinbe. Our temperaments influence everything we do. They influence how we sleep, eat, study, and how we make love. Even dictate our sexual preferences, responses, turn-offs, and how we get attracted to other people sexually. So by the end of this evening, I hope that you will have a really firm understanding of your particular temperament as it relates to the UC-OC continuum and its impact on your sexual and intimate lives. Okay. So now everyone has a sense of whether they're going to buy the book at the end of the night, right? Whether you're OC. So let me just talk a little bit about UC so that you have a sense. So UC is, again, on a continuum, right? UC is most associated with being low in constraint, impulsive, risk-taking, maybe where emotions, very large, having large emotions, right? If one of their friends tell them that they just won the lottery, they'll be jumping up and down and their hands will be flailing. I mean, it's a lot of excitement. Emotionally expressive, as I mentioned, maybe more disorganized. They'd be maybe less invested in how they feel relative to their response and less concerned about how other people feel relative to their behavior, right? Now, again, on the extreme of the UC continuum, you would have maladaptive forms, and that would show up as things like ADHD, bipolar, histrionic personality, antisocial, narcissistic. Those are things that we typically think of as extremes of the UC. Of course, most people don't live down there, right? For the OC, we think about these as nature, nurture, and coping. These are the three legs of the UC nature. So with the nature element, we have diminished reward sensitivity. Now, what does that mean? Diminished reward sensitivity. It means that you're just not all that excitable about things, right? It's not what drives you. Let's talk about sex, right? That's why you're all here on a Monday night, freaks. Just the pleasure of sex isn't something that motivates you to naturally want more and more of it, right? For a lot of UCs. Hypersensitivity to threat. So OCs tend to be threat sensitive, rejection sensitive, right? We have High inhibitory control. You know how to delay gratification like nobody business. Right? You know how to delay gratification. That's a huge trait. And also high detail processing are all under that nature element. Now, nurture, we have mistakes being intolerable, the perfectionism, avoidance to feeling vulnerable. If someone asks you, how are you doing? I bet your favorite F word is
Fine.
favorite F word is fine. Now, if you are upset, you might share a little bit, but your other favorite F word is frustrated. I'm frustrated. This is frustrating. Right? So, one of the reasons that overcontrolled people avoid vulnerability is because we don't like uncertainty. We like to know what's going to happen. And when we don't know what's going to happen, that makes us feel vulnerable. Am I preaching to the... Is this thing on? No. Thank you. Is that resonating with you? That vulnerability, I don't like. I don't want other people to manage my money because I want to know exactly where it's going, right? Or I want to plan out the trip in great detail because I want to make sure that we know where we're going to be, when we're going to be, and who we're going to be with. Right? And then the third one is coping, masking inner feelings. We often carry the neutral face. Anybody been told you have the resting bitch face? Right? I like to tell this story. When I was in graduate school, I had a professor say, Tom, you have perfected the poker face. And he goes, the problem with that is that when people are talking to you, they don't know what you're doing with the information they're giving you. And so I really tried to work hard of raising my eyebrows and smiling. But sometimes when I'm listening with such intensity, that I forget to do those things. And one day I had a client, this is when I was the director of the counseling center over at UNCSA. I had a client, and he says to me, he goes, sometimes I feel like at any moment you're going to pull a knife from behind your back and eviscerate me. So I said, so you're afraid I'll make you spill your guts? So we have that kind of face, the resting bitch face, or that neutral face. And the problem with the neutral face is that it's experienced as a threat to the people on the receiving end. Right? So it's important to show affect on your face to communicate pro-social skills. And so it's leading into that, over-controlled people are often called aloof and distant. That we're aloof and distant. Right? It's very common. It's very common. Now, in many areas of our lives, these are superpowers. It can be quite helpful and effective to be detail-oriented, to be planful, and to be goal-oriented, to be dependable and reliable. In many areas of our lives, over-controlled people get highly rewarded for their temperament. Right? Yeah, we can get highly rewarded. But if the over-controlled temperament is going to be a problem, it tends to be a problem in people's sexual and intimate relationships. And that's the reason why I wrote Making Nice with Naughty. Thoughts, comments, questions so far? Yeah. Good for you for asking. You must be UC. So you would be OC. If you have a higher score on the right side than on the left side. OC. Not to be confused with over-controlling. I want to underscore that. I'm really interested, yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good question. If you feel that your intimate relationships are meaningful and fulfilling to the people who experience it from you, then whatever form of temperament you have is highly adaptable. Certainly, there are certain careers where being predictable, being planful, and whatnot are important, but it's likely that your OC nature makes that possible. But it doesn't mean you can't have fun, right? I mean, OCs can have fun. Now, some people have a harder time having fun because they're further along on the continuum, right? But yeah, we certainly can have fun. Now, some of us might use a little alcohol to help with that, right? But we can still get that for sure. So the question is, does opposites attract? What the research says is that primarily no, that we tend to be much more of a birds of a feather than opposites attract. Now, what happens though is that often there might be a partner who is more OC than their partner is. And the one who is more OC is likely to see their partner as UC, when in fact they're just not as OC. Right? And so they think, oh, that's opposites attract. It's just really a difference in degree. Yeah. I would imagine, particularly for OCs, having an incredibly UC person in your life would be, I'm having a panic attack just thinking about it. Right? That would be very exhausting. Yeah. But let's revisit some of those criteria or those characteristics I mentioned earlier. How might high sensitivity to threat impede sexuality or impact sexuality? Might not like surprises, right? Maybe a no first person. We know those people, right? They're more likely, if someone wants to invite them to do something, they're more likely to be no first, check the lay of the land, and then they might be persuaded to say yes, but they're tempted to be like no first. When your partner says, hey, would you wear a strap on and do it from behind? No, not going to do that. But I might be persuaded. So, we're going to get real. It's okay we talk about these things tonight, right? What about having an orgasm? Right? If someone has this degree of perfectionism, right? There are 4 types, by the way. I'll skip ahead. There are 4 types of perfectionism that tends to impede sexuality. The I have to be sexually perfect. I have to look a certain way. My breasts have to look a certain way. My labia have to look a certain way. My belly has to look a certain way. Right? I have to be sexually perfect. My partner has to be sexually perfect. That there's something about them that has to be perfect. The third one is, I think my partner thinks I have to be sexually perfect. So we start spectatoring, we imagine what our partner must be thinking. And then the fourth one is, society expects me to be sexually perfect. And I think particularly for women, that's an important consideration, right? And we could talk about, for example, I have to be sexually perfect or my partner has to be sexually perfect. I recommend that everybody, if you don't have this, do yourself a favor right now. Get on Amazon and buy yourself the largest container of lube that you can find. And have that on your side table. Lube is your friend. And make it a pump action. Nothing. Do not get the stuff with the cap where you have to use both hands to unscrew that. You just want to be able to go, and then. But if in your mind says, oh, I shouldn't need lubrication. I shouldn't need lubrication. Or if you have a partner who thinks, oh, why aren't I enough? Am I not turning you on enough? Right? Or it can be about your beliefs about your partner's erection. Does my partner's erection or their lubrication, lack thereof, define my worth? Or if my partner doesn't orgasm or I don't orgasm, does that mean that we didn't have a good time? You following me? Anybody want to share? No. Did you say no? Well, water-based lube won't. But no, you're right. A silicone-based, there are different types of lube for different types of sex. But the water-based is totally fine. Just don't get anything with any of those extra ingredients like that supposed to warm you up or taste good or no one needs that up your hoo-ha. Now, I want to be aware that I'm speaking from the male experience too. So, I certainly would not want to presume that I know what the female sexual experience is. I'm just sharing the stories of many of my clients and how they relate to this content. But you are most certainly the expert on your own experience. What about mistakes being intolerable? How might that interfere with sex and intimacy? Who goes behind your partner to rearrange the dishwasher because it wasn't done right? Who doesn't want their partner to fold their laundry because it isn't done right? So can you imagine what that might be for your partner to be on the receiving end of that? Yeah. If I were to use different words, it sounds like you have what is called a pleasure-based view of sex versus a performance-based view of sex. But a lot of people struggle because they have a performance-based view. I have to get the erection, or I have to get lubricated, I have to have an orgasm, I have to. They have that perfectionism quality, and that performance-based view of sex is what interferes in a significant portion of those who have sexual problems, who are on the OC continuum. Yeah. So a big piece of my work and the work of most sex therapists is to how do we help people to go from that performance-based view to the pleasure-based view? I mean, did any of you grow up in the purity movement? Yeah, I saw some heads and hands. I mean, that purity movement. Are people familiar with what the purity movement is? So this idea that you need to wait and that sex is only valid in the context of marriage and that otherwise it's a sin and it's terrible and you should never do it. As a sex therapist, I've seen a lot of people, particularly in the South, who've grown up in that culture, who were told sex is bad, sex is terrible, sex is wrong, that men only want one thing and you need to be on the lookout because they're essentially predators. Then there's a wedding day. And then they say, I do. And all of that's supposed to magically go away. And it doesn't, right? That they continue to hold on to a lot of the angst around sex and sexuality. And particularly if they already are OC leaning and they grow up in that environment, it can really supercharge that OC quality in their personality. Thank you for sharing that aspect. There are two subtypes of OC. There's the overly agreeable and the overly disagreeable. The overly agreeable is the need to be liked, So the overly agreeable subtype of thinking, how do I accommodate other people and not ruffle feathers and get them to like me? So often having a smile on their face, kind of being chirpy. Sometimes these people will have, they'll seem like they're pooping sunshine. I don't know if you know those people. And then there's the overly disagreeable. And those are the people who have a need to be right. So we have the need to be liked, and then there are those who have the need to be right. Am I hitting home? Shelley's like, that's you. In case you didn't know. So the need to be liked, the need to be right. So during sex, and you're thinking about the need to be liked, what you can imagine is that people who have that subtype are more likely to fake orgasms. Right? They have the need, they don't want to ruffle any feathers, they don't want to actually say, this isn't doing it for me, I don't like how you're going down on me, I want you to give me more pressure, or go faster, go slower, use your fingers, or whatever it is. They're less likely to give that kind of feedback because they're afraid that they might offend their sexual partner. Yeah. Did you want to say something about that? I was sharing this earlier at the table. I think it's worth noting that sometimes, particularly if you have an over-controlled partner, how many people think they have an OC partner tonight? Right? So a lot of OCs will have this belief that, particularly during heterosexual sex, that their penis should be enough. But we know that only about 12 to 15% of women have orgasms through penetration alone. But if they have it in their mind, or if you have it in your mind, I shouldn't need to masturbate. I don't need to stimulate my clitoris because my partner should be enough. You can see how that is more performance-based than pleasure-based, and how that can interfere. Now, again, we have the disagreeable subtype. And I mentioned earlier, they're the ones that will say no, right? And they're more likely to be no, check the environment. So I share this story. I hope it's as interesting to you as it was for me. So if you go to a sex therapy conference, what do you think people do there? They have sex. It's very common to get, hook up, conference sex, something I'm sure none of you have ever heard of. And so I'm at the sex therapy conference, and people just go up to people. Do you want to have sex? It's true. It's true. Absolutely. Absolutely. I see you back there. He's like, how do I sign up? So I hook up with this person, and we go back to her hotel room. And she says to me, hey, do you want to have sex out on the balcony? And there's a part of me that wants to say yes. And then she opens the curtain, and the balcony is lit like the 4th of July. No, I'm not having sex out on the balcony. That's that, where UCs would be so on that. They'll be like, let's right? Okay, so we have the agreeable and disagreeable. Do you have a sense of, if you're OC, do you have a sense of where you might fall? Overly agreeable, overly disagreeable, and how that might show up in the bedroom, how that might show up in your intimate relationships. So also with the OC temperament, there's the fixed mindset and the fatalistic mindset. The fixed mindset is, imagine you're the captain of the Titanic, and you get hit by, you hit an iceberg, and clearly you're taking on water, the fixed mindset is you're like, fuck it, we're headed to New York anyway. Right? That no matter what is happening, all the feedback is telling you we need plan B, but you're still stuck on plan A. You're going to do plan A, no matter what, no matter who is getting upset. It's like we got to do plan A. The fatalistic mindset would be the captain of the Titanic hitting the iceberg and going within themselves, where you go to captain's quarter and you just hunker down in the corner and wait it out, right? So you just kind of go inside and give up, right? So that would be the fatalistic mindset. What we would want to do is go to what is the flexible mindset, right? The flexible mindset. And the flexible mindset is a little bit of fixed and fatalistic combined. So the flexible mindset says, oh crap, we hit the iceberg. Clearly we're not going to New York tonight. So let's get all the women and children and the rich men onto the boats, right? And we'll just hope that someone's going to come and pick us up, right? So it's like one of the things that OCs tend to resist is feedback. Right? OCs tend to resist feedback. Why? Because we think we're right. We think we're right. Not because we are pretentious, although we might be, but because we spent a lot of time studying the issue. Right? We tend to make good decisions. And so we resist feedback when situations have changed. Right? So again, sexually, how open and receptive are you to the feedback that you might be getting about your own sexual experience, the sexual experience that you might be having with your partner, and having conversations around sex and sexuality that are pleasure-based, right, more than performance-based. Question that I'll often get is somebody will say, well, I just have sex because I feel like I have to. I just kind of do it without any consideration of, well, if you're going to do it anyway, then what would you have to do to have the best time you can? And it doesn't necessarily mean in the bedroom. So as a sex therapist, you can imagine a very common issue that comes to my office is low sexual desire. Do we have any women's health people in the audience? Yeah, some. I mean, is that a common issue, low sexual desire? A reason why this has become a neurotic impulse for a lot of particularly women is because we as a culture have been programmed that there's only one healthy type of desire, and that is spontaneous desire. Right? That I should be like all of the porn actors, ready to go at a moment's notice. Right? I should be ready. And of course, that isn't most women. Most women do not have spontaneous desire. Most women have either responsive desire or contextual desire. So responsive desire is your partner touches your leg. You weren't thinking about sex, but now that they touched your leg, you're like, oh, I see what we're doing here. All right? Now, I'm a sex therapist, and while most men do have spontaneous desire, I actually have responsive desire. I don't think about sex all that much unless my partner touches my leg, and I think, oh, I see what we're doing here. The third is contextual desire. Now, contextual desire is much more nuanced. It's this recognition that there are certain accelerators and brakes, and that there's this mixture of accelerators and brakes. For some people, if there are dishes in the sink, that's a brake. If you can hear kids down the hall, brake. Right? If your partner just got back from the gym and they have gym odor, brake. Whereas some people, the partner gets back from the gym, and that's an accelerator. They want that, you see. Understanding the nuance. And that's why Peggy Kleinplatz, I wish I would have coined this, but Peggy Kleinplatz said that sometimes low sexual desire is not evidence of something wrong with someone. It might be evidence of good judgment. Right? That your partner might be showing up in a way that forces you to hit the brakes. Right? But because they think they want to have sex in any given moment, and society says that spontaneous desire is the right one, and that if you don't have spontaneous desire, there must be something wrong with you. And that is the biggest myth, right? So educating yourself and your partner about what kind of desire you have and what kind of desire the other person has and how that impacts each other in your sexual relationship. Now, some people might say, but I have contextual desire now, but when I first met my partner, we were going at it all the time. That was a different context. It was still contextual desire, it was just a different context. Right? Thank you so much for asking or for bringing this up, because this is such an important topic that I didn't intend to talk about. That your marriage is a perfect example of what it means to be too close. Too close. That's a beginning. That's an option. Yeah. Go to a sex therapy conference. Yeah. On the balcony. Yeah. I don't have to be home until closeness. In our culture, we fetishize closeness. But closeness has with it these qualities: low risk, low anxiety, high predictability, comfort, and familiarity. Low risk, low anxiety, predictability, high predictability, comfort, and familiarity. And so a lot of couples will come into my office and they'll say, we're just not close anymore. And I can tell within 5-10 minutes, you're too close. You're too close. Intimacy, on the other hand, is high risk, high anxiety, low predictability, newness, and novelty. High risk, high anxiety, low predictability, newness, and novelty. I'm going to tell you. Think of affairs. Affairs. What are affairs? High risk, high anxiety, low predictability, newness, and novelty. Now, all relationships start out as intimate. All relationships start out as intimate. But if there is an intention for a long-term relationship, closeness starts to come in, and it has to, right? There has to be an understanding of who's going to pay this bill, who's going to pick up the kids, who's going to do this, that, or the other thing. So closeness is important. Passion requires an element of mystery. The erotic requires mystery. It requires intimacy. You see, closeness says, I know you. I know you. We've been together 25 years. I know you. And intimacy is the deep knowing that no matter how hard I try, no matter how long I try, I can never know you. The most that I will ever know is my mind chatter about you. I can never know you. But what I can know is myself better in your presence. I get to know myself better in your presence. And you hear that a little bit in the word intimacy. Into me I see. I get to experience myself better in your presence. So, how do you do that? Well, first, you begin thinking of yourself as a sexual being. Particularly with women, as women get part of the family, as we get older, we tend to give up on the identity of being a sexual being, right? But it's really reclaiming that notion that you are a sexual being 24/7. I said this to the table earlier, and they 100% got it correct. The question I often ask clients is, when's the last time you read a book, a nonfiction book about sex and sexuality? What do you think the most common answer is?
Ever?
Never. Never. It's the most common answer. But how much have you spent on your educational development, your spiritual development, your physical development, your career, but not on your sexual development? I don't know about you, but who I was as a sexual being in my teens versus my 20s, 30s, now 40s is very different. And we have to update our sexual knowledge because who we are different. And so when you view yourself as a sexual being, you start to look at yourself differently. What is it that I want sexually? If I know that sex is like a button that I just push play and then rewind and repeat every time, then whose responsibility is to shake it up? In other words, I will often ask, well, who's the first person in bed? Well, first of all, what percentage of time that you're having sex are you only having sex in the bedroom? I mean, I don't know about you, but if you have a mortgage, you have the mortgage for the whole house. You can have sex other places. Who's setting up the scene, if you will? Right? If you're just going into in bed, you're initiating that cycle. How do we want to do this differently? Questions, comments, reflections? In our society, we tell women you should like sex, but don't like it too much. Right? Yeah, where that message isn't given to men. You know, we don't when a man has a lot of sexual partners, we tend to excuse that behavior. Or we ask people, what's your count, what's your number, right? As if that should matter. Right? We make decisions about people, about if they have a sex life that they enjoy. You know, and if you hear people asking those questions, I invite you to maybe offer up an opportunity for education. It really doesn't matter. Or, you know, good on them for enjoying their bodies. It's very common, though, a lot of people will talk about, particularly women, that as they reach into their later 40s and into 50s, that they're much freer to enjoy their bodies and sexuality, particularly when they don't have kids down the hall, right? Or they don't have the demand, they're more firmly established in their career or whatever it is, that they feel safer that way. I do want to, yeah, certainly other times. And the conversation is, I want to have a luscious sex life with you. And I want this to carry us through many years to come. And this is why I want to talk about these things. Right? Yes. Particularly if you're aware, these are the things that I want you to do to my body so that I can experience pleasure maximally. So earlier I talked about the difference between closeness and intimacy. And that intimacy requires an element of the erotic. That also includes objectification. And I know that that is a bad word for a lot of people. But to be in a sexual relationship does require that we will objectify our partner and allow ourselves to be objectified. Now, what I mean by that is there's nuance there in that no one wants to solely be objectified. We all want to be appreciated for the myriad things that we bring to the table. I'll give you a clinical example. I had a couple where they were a young couple. They had 2 children. And as the children came, the wife was just so disinterested in having her husband touch her. She just felt like her body wasn't hers anymore, and the babies were all over her, et cetera, very common. And during that time, he would pursue and be rejected, pursue and be rejected, pursue and be rejected. After a period of time, he stopped pursuing, right? He made an adjustment in his own sexuality, and he stopped pursuing. Well, now the kids are older, and there's less demands placed on her, and now she's starting to be interested. He couldn't just turn the switch on, right? He couldn't have the objectification, right? He couldn't see his partner as a sexual being any longer. And so there is a tax that's associated with it. And monogamy has with it, as an occupational hazard, a decrease in desire over time. What the research says is that in monogamy, we tend to lust after our partner about 8% per year less. And we tend to like our partner about 4% per year less. Right? Because what does monogamy do? And I'm not anti-monogamy by any stretch, but what monogamy does is it removes competition from the equation. To know that someone else is attracted to you, or to know someone else is attracted to your partner, can be an aphrodisiac. But for a lot of couples, they want safety and security, right? That's something OCs tend to really search for, is safety and security. They want it, and so they get it. But that often means don't flirt with anybody, don't talk to anybody. There's a lot of rules that is thought to keep that contract in place. And so there's a natural decline, though, in liking and lusting over time. So with monogamy, there is a set of rights and responsibilities that hardly anybody ever talks about. That when you choose monogamy, and it's a perfectly fine choice, but when you choose it, you're also choosing the right, which is I get to enjoy my partner's body in ways that other people don't have access to. My partner gets to enjoy my body in ways that other people don't have access to. That's kind of like the right. Now, it doesn't mean, however, that every time your partner wants to have sex, that you have to have sex with them. Because it's precisely your ability to say no that gives the yes its meaning. If you could only say yes, then what meaning would it have? You follow me? What is the responsibility? The responsibility is to be interested in the sexual needs of the other. To be interested in the sexual needs of the other. So if your partner isn't interested in what turns you on, or turns you off for that matter, then that's a violation of the monogamy contract. If you're not interested in what your partner's sexual needs are, then that would be also a violation of the monogamy contract. But what happens in practice is that one person may have no sexual desire and then become irritated that their partner still wants to have sex. Right? And it's okay, it is okay for everybody in this room to decide today, I don't ever want to have sex again. Right? That's totally fine. But it's not okay to expect that your partner will also not want to have sex, right? But what I see is a lot of people are thrust into forced celibacy because there is not an interest in the sexual needs of the other. And that can particularly happen in the context of the over-controlled temperament because we tend to put a lot of emphasis on monogamy as a source of safety and security, which, of course, it does offer. Did I lose anybody there? Because that can be a controversial topic. Anybody got sweat under the armpits? No? Anybody want to react to it or disagree with me? You're all welcome to.
I heard a quote a long time ago that was, you can teach your partner not to want you, but you can't teach them not to want.
Yes. Ooh, that's so good. Yeah. What is the alternative? I'll ask, would you rather them be interested in you sexually or never interested in you sexually? It's much better that we are to be desired, because when we don't feel desired, that's when it makes it susceptible that other people will communicate desire to us, and that's what makes us vulnerable to affairs, is whether other people will communicate desire. So another quote here: true passion is sustainable if you're willing to shift your perspective from my partner is the problem to your own mind being the problem. So we talked about sexual perfectionism, we talked about the fatalistic mindset, the fixed mindset. You must take responsibility for your passion and get active about it. That's job number one, because you are the critical driver to passion in your relationship, not someone else. Do you turn yourself on? When you walk by the mirror, do you wink at yourself? No. Oh, yeah. What was that? Being able to see yourself as a sexual being, that really starts, that's the beginning. Do you see yourself as a sexual being? Do you like your own company? Right? Do you feel good in the skin that you're in? Or do you have mind chatter that's critical, judgmental, right, that tells you you're not good enough, smart enough, capable enough, pretty enough, talented enough? Right? All of that drains your desire to be sexually expressive. It's harder to be in that mental space. Or do you have mind chatter that says, I have to get everything done on my to-do list. I can't relax. Your mind goes a million miles a minute. Having sex is just a waste of time. Because I know it's only going to last 3 seconds. Why bother? Right? So it really does begin with you. I talk about in the book the work of Byron Katie. Do we have anybody who's familiar with the work of Byron? Ooh, look at you all. So I would I'd like to have a volunteer of someone who would like to do the work to confront some of this inner dialogue, this inner mind chatter. And so if no one wants to be first, so whoever wants to be second, and you have a relational issue or stressor that you would be willing to share and talk openly about, I would welcome the opportunity to go through the process of the work so that you can see how it's done. Do I have any volunteers?
After 20 years, the wife complains about her husband's lack of foreplay and conversation before intimacy. She remembers their impulsive encounters, but now finds his last-minute asks lacking emotional connection. The husband defends his position, stating he requires certainty before initiating sex. For a better experience, the woman favors foreplay, snuggling, and pre-intercourse talk. She determines that the husband's approach is off-putting, making sex unlikely in the coming week.
That is a perfect OC response. Can you hear that? I don't want to risk feeling vulnerable and being rejected, so I want absolute certainty that you're going to say yes before I start the process of doing the foreplay. Does that sound familiar? Yeah. Right. So, can you say a little bit more of how you wish he would be different? I need my husband to initiate foreplay. So, in the work of Byron Katie, the idea is that if I'm particularly distressed, it's because I'm telling myself a story, right? And if you have a thought, this is the idea, right? I'm being deprived of my husband's initiation of foreplay. So if you have a thought, and that thought is heavy, that's your clue you bought a thought that isn't true. 100% of the time. If you have a thought, and that thought is heavy, that's your clue you bought a thought that isn't true. Right? So we'll take an example here. I need my husband to initiate foreplay. Right? I'm going to ask you 4 questions. Is that true? It's a yes or no. Okay? Because you said no to the first question, we'll skip the second question and go to the third question. How do you react inside when you believe the thought, I need to initiate foreplay, and yet he doesn't? Makes you irritated and ill. And then how do you show up to him from that place of feeling irritated and ill? Yeah. And so, who would you be? This is question 4. Who would you be if it weren't possible for you to have the thought, I need to initiate sex with foreplay first?
I would be the person that I've been. So I know I'm responsible for this pattern because I've not demanded or expected foreplay. I would be much more interested in having sex with him.
So, what is the opposite of I need to initiate foreplay? What's the opposite of that? I will initiate foreplay with. How is that different than I never initiate? So if it's important for me to want to have foreplay, but I never initiate foreplay, then what it is that you want to be wanted more than you want what you say you want. You want to be wanted more than you want what you say you want. That's true. I love it when clients say that. I need me to initiate foreplay. So, by the way, this is some other truisms. Whenever you experience prolonged discontent, and when I mean prolonged, I mean more than a few hours. Any prolonged discontent, and this is true for everybody in here, everybody. It's because one or both of the following reasons. It's this simple. It's because I'm focusing on shit I have no control over, and or I'm not taking action on the shit I do have control over. So in any situation, if you're feeling prolonged discontent, ask yourself, am I focusing on shit I have no control over? Or have I not yet taken action on the shit that I have control over? So the first turnaround was I need me to initiate foreplay. There's another turnaround. Can you think of what it is? I need to initiate foreplay was the first one. The first opposite is I need me to initiate foreplay.
I don't need my husband to initiate foreplay in order to have sex.
How do we know that that's true? Because I've been able to have sex without foreplay. That my absence of foreplay has demonstrated to him that I don't need to have foreplay in order to have sex. That it actually is to his benefit. He is quite an efficient man.
A little scared, so I'd fill in for you.
What's your name?
Alexis.
Alexis.
So I have this fear that he will soon not find me interesting enough. That when we weren't living together, everything we did was novel, right? Because there was so much time in between seeing each other and doing things together. And then you get close and comfortable. And not to say that, like, we aren't fun and that we don't have good sex. But there is still always this, like, when is he going to not want me because he sees that I'm not doing enough in life, not even just in bed, but like at what point am I going to be boring to him?
Right. Excellent. Excellent. So this is a wonderful question, and I'm going to go about it a different way. That thought, if you go inside, does that thought feel light or heavy?
So heavy.
So what do we know about heavy thoughts? There's something not true there, right? And we might have to spend some time to uncover it, but there's a supporting belief that isn't true. So there are three types of business. Folks who know Byron Katie, do you know what the three types are? There's your business. There's not your business. And then there's the universe's business, things that you and no one else has control over. Whose business is it what he thinks and feels?
Not mine.
Not your business. And when you're minding his business, who's minding yours?
No one.
And then who suffers? So we're looking at where the untrue thought was. It's his thoughts and feelings are my business, right? So the thought is I need him to find me interesting. Is that right? I need him to find me interesting. And keep in mind, anxiety, she used the word anxiety. All anxiety is a future-oriented thought, right? So anxiety comes about because of too much of the ego's focus on the future, just like depression is an overfocus on the past, right? So we have this overfocus on the future. What if I'm boring and he might
Leave me.
Right? So that's the fuel of the anxiety. So what is the opposite of I need him to find me interesting?
I don't need him to find me interesting.
I don't need him to find me interesting. How do we know that that's true?
I don't know.
Were you in fact in existence before he even knew you?
Yes.
So we know that you don't need him to find you interesting because in fact you have existed without him finding you interesting. Isn't that right? What's the other turnaround? I need
Me to find me interesting?
I need me to find me interesting. Right? Or you could go to the original, which is I find myself to be boring, which was the other one, right? I need me to find myself. I need me to find me interesting. And then there's a third turnaround, unlike the other example. This has a third turnaround. I need me to find
Him interesting,
such that he is entitled to his own thoughts and feelings about me without it being my business. Right? Can you see how that? So there are three, and they all three don't have to be equally as true, but one of them is going to feel truer than the I need him to find me interesting. Which one do you think feels truer? I need me to find me interesting. I don't need him to find me interesting, or I need me to find him interesting.
I need to find him interesting.
I need to find him interesting. That he can have his own thoughts, feelings, reactions, and I can let him decide what they are in this moment rather than reaching into the future. I learned this from Dr. Page, by the way. Reaching into the future and pulling future anticipated pain into the present moment. Because when you are reaching into the future to pull anticipated pain into the present moment, and from that anxious place, how do you show up to him?
Scared, a big crybaby.
Perhaps a whole lot of not interesting?
Yeah.
Yeah.
A whole lot of depressing, sitting on the couch. Yeah.
Right. But if I find myself interesting, would I be home sitting on the couch? No, I might be more interesting. You see. Are you following the flow, how it works? Can you, in your own mind, begin to think about how you might respond? Thank you, Alexis. The point that I'm trying to drive home, and a big piece of why I wrote Making Nice with Naughty, is that if you're going to focus on what you have control over, a big piece of that is what is it that this inner narrator of your life saying to you? And how much of your mental energy is buying those thoughts, right? Like you're a compulsive buyer, even when those thoughts are heavy. Or do you just observe the thoughts and choose to buy the light ones because you know that the heavy ones aren't going to be working for you? Making Nice with Naughty is breaking some of that old programming that was mentioned earlier in the excerpt. Is breaking the old programming so that you can feel like, oh, I am desiring of pleasure. Right? I am worthy of feeling good about myself sexually. That I'm going to even spend time to explore myself sexually in the absence of a partner. Right? So that I can then provide feedback to my partner or to the partner to be of what I like. And kind of declare it as if you want to enjoy this body, this is how I want you to realize that it works, right? Because I want to have this good time with you. You know, sometimes, believe it or not, this is true. It sounds braggadocious. A surprisingly common remark people will say to me is, I bet you really know how to eat pussy. It's very common. And I will remind them, and I will say to them, you know, while it's true that I know a lot about eating pussy, the reality is that I know nothing about eating yours. Right? That this is a relationship, right? Requires feedback. If you want me to be good at this, I need to have feedback. Is that too much for a Monday night? I don't know. So thank you so much for having me this evening. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much to Dr. Tom Murray. This was amazing. He has his books for sale, Venmo, up here. It's very easy. Thank y'all so much for coming. I've said this every time, but this group could not happen without people showing up. You have like hundreds of children between you, so many jobs, so many responsibilities, so many other places that you could be. You could be asleep right now. You could be watching Netflix. You could be doing all the stuff he's suggesting we maybe try again in our lives. I'm kidding. So thank you for choosing to be here tonight. It's so good to see everybody. All right.